Welcome everyone to the June MCT Meetup, led by David Barry. David is an MCT with over 20 years of experience in Microsoft technologies. He advocates continuous learning and growth mindset. Some of his favorite topics are DevSecOps, AI, and SharePoint, and enjoys talking about the developer experience and agile methodologies. His favorite MCT experience was an Azure instructor for the launch of Microsoft's Enterprise Skills Initiative program. I'll hand it off to David. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. Let's see here. Let me get my share going for you. All right. Can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see it? Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. So let's go ahead and get started a little bit. Domia did a great job kicking me off and introducing me. My name is David Barry. I've been in the Microsoft space for over 25 years, mainly with SharePoint, M365, and now M365 Copilot and other AI solutions. I currently work for Directions on Microsoft. We're an independent analyst firm focused entirely on Microsoft. We have no relationship with them whatsoever. So our analysis is unbiased, discussion about Microsoft technologies, as well as we also support our clients on licensing when they come up for renewals. So, as she mentioned, I'm an MCT. I actually became an MCT community lead this year, so I really enjoy helping out the MCT community. For those of you who are MCTs or interested in being an MCT, feel free to reach out to me with any questions. You're welcome to link in with me. I believe that QR code should still work. So feel free to do that, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you do, I would appreciate it if you put a little note in the invite, though, to just let me know how you came in contact with me. Feel free to check out my company, directionsonmicrosoft.com, or on LinkedIn as well. I'm also a member of the Northern Virginia Technology Council. I am based outside of Washington, D.C. It's a great council to be a part of if you're in this area and your company is a member. We do some great things for the community in terms of sharing information and helping to drive technology agenda in Northern Virginia here. All right, with that, let's get into it. So we're here today to talk about Microsoft 365 Copilot. I'll call it M365 Copilot. I may also just call it Copilot, but be assured we are talking just about M365 Copilot. I'll also talk a little bit about M365 Copilot Chat, the younger sibling, I guess you could call it, of M365 Copilot. But really what our focus is here today is to talk to you about what some of the steps are to get your organization ready for Copilot and how to take advantage of some of the tooling that comes with M365 Copilot and some of the other suites available from Microsoft. So with that, feel free jumping in to ask any questions in the chat. I'll do my best to keep my eyes on it as we go through this. I'll check it periodically. So ask any questions and let's get started. So first thing that we want to talk about are some of the common obstacles and objectives regarding deploying M365 Chat or Copilot, rather. It's not necessarily a straightforward thing. Companies have a lot of concern. Microsoft has noted that adoption has been slow, and they are making inroads into trying to streamline some things and make it more palatable for customers to roll out Copilot. So as we go through this section, I'd be very interested to hear from you if your organization is having any of the same obstacles to adopting Copilot that I talk about. If I don't talk about something that your company is dealing with, I'd love to hear about it to see what the challenges are for everybody involved. And if you're an MCT, welcome. This should hopefully give you some background into the same issues that may come up as you teach some of the classes. And there actually is an assessment that deals with a lot of the material that I'll be talking about throughout this. So, all right. So when we talk about getting started with deploying M365 Copilots, it's not something that we really want to just flip the switch on in our environment. It's really important to understand what it can do and what the implications are when you do it. M365 Copilot is embedded into basically M365 and the Graph API. So anything that the Graph is connected to, M365 Copilot is likely to have access to. So predominantly, our points of concern are SharePoint, usually first and foremost, followed by arguably OneDrive and also Exchange. Majority of what I'm talking about here today will focus on SharePoint and OneDrive as we go through it, because they tend to be some of the biggest pain points for organizations. And if you've worked with SharePoint, you're probably well aware that overshared content is the primary offender. This is a big issue across many different enterprises, so you are not alone if this is something that you are facing. And what it comes down to basically is the way I look at it is overshared content is content that have basically been over permissioned, very lax permissions on the content. So it's easy to do in SharePoint because we tend to delegate some of this responsibility to the end users, the site owners, and in some cases even the site administrators may have done this. But it's one of the concerns that is limiting adoption of M365 Copilot because Copilot can surface information in new ways, making security through obscurity more obsolete, if that's a phrase, than it should be in the first place. So this is definitely something that everybody is concerned with. The second one that came out largely due to AI in general and not necessarily just M365 Copilot is intellectual property. And this usually takes two forms. The first one is, how do I know Microsoft won't use my data to train its models? That's very common ever since ChatGPT exploded on the scene in 22. And people started seeing proprietary information get leaked out, and they realized that OpenAI had made no promise or obligation that they wouldn't use the data to retrain their models. So that became a huge flashpoint there. So that has carried over into any of the Microsoft services as well, particularly with its relationship with OpenAI. The second one is, how do I not get sued for copyright infringement based on creating new content or leveraging existing content? And that is another big obstacle. And companies are looking towards Microsoft for assurances that they won't. And I'll talk about how that's addressed in a little bit. But the short answer is Microsoft does assure that it does not train, and there is some limited guarantee from Microsoft with regard to copyright. Probably one of the bigger issues is data classification in many organizations, starting with whether or not you've even done it. We'll be talking mainly focused on the use of sensitivity labels throughout this session, but there's more to it than just the sensitivity labels. However, that ties in pretty tightly with other features and functionality with Copilot and later with Purview that we'll see. User trust is also a big issue in many places, maybe not as prevalent or obvious in some places. We kind of have two thoughts about it. Is, one, people are very concerned that AI is coming for them. So they may be resistant to using AI. And the reality probably is more along the lines of, while yes, there is risk to job loss, there is greater risk if you don't embrace AI technologies in the first place. So take advantage of using M365 in all of its capacities to help yourself as much as your companies. The second thing tends to be around frustration with the tools in general, not just with M365 Copilot, because people aren't necessarily trained to maximize their productivity. And generally that comes down to things like understanding how to write prompts properly to get out the information that you're talking about. Shadow AI has kind of come into being lately, maybe not lately, but it's at least been tagged as lately. And this is kind of the opposite side of some of the users on the user trust side, where these are, early adopters, cutting edge folks. They use any available GPT service, to be more productive, to gain that edge in productivity and just overall improve themselves. However, it's a potential liability for companies because these other services are public. They're outside the security boundary of their data. So this poses a challenge, and bringing in a tool like M365 that's inside your, or M365 Copilot that's inside your security boundary can help mitigate that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention here are the use cases. This can be overlooked in many occasions because people aren't necessarily thinking about how best to leverage the technology, at least not as a forefront. There's been a lot of pressure to roll things out and figure out later how to maximize it. But with M365 Copilot at $30 per user per month, a lot of the organizations are concerned about the costs, and identifying the use cases can help justify the expenses of Copilot. So with that, a couple of things to be aware of. Recommendations might be too strong a word, but really these are kind of like some steps. Read the Microsoft Generative AI services in the universal licensing terms. This has Microsoft's stance in not using your data to train AI. It also commits that your output generated is your output. Microsoft has no claim on that as well. That's kind of a sub concern of a lot of people. And then it also has the customer copyright commitment in it. And that is an interesting commitment from Microsoft that pledges to basically cover lawsuits against your organization for use of third-party intellectual property. However, it's not as straightforward as that, and there are a number of conditions that Microsoft associates it with it, which makes it a little bit challenging to fulfill for customers. So make sure that you understand what's in there and what the level of protection is. The other document to read is the Enterprise Data Protection for M365 Copilot. This extended the EDP from SharePoint and Exchange to cover specifically M365 Copilot and most notably prompts and responses. The big one, if you're planning to deploy M365 Copilot, is make sure you allocate people and the resources to do it. As I said, this is not something you flip on lightly, so you want to make sure that your organization looks at it carefully and prepares for it. I covered off on identifying the use cases and making sure that you have the justification. This can be really helpful in identifying, future pilot groups, how to roll out Copilot licensing to different groups that are truly going to benefit from the productivity enhancements of using this particular tool. The probably the only technical-ish recommendation in this stage is validating external sharing for SharePoint and OneDrive. So the tenant has the capability to, block external access or limit guest access for both SharePoint and OneDrive. So you want to understand what your current settings are and whether or not they should be more restrictive. Planning for data classification and governance. I touched on this with the sensitivity labels, but it's a much broader topic than just the sensitivity labels, but the sensitivity labels are going to be the most probably visible aspect of it. If you're not familiar with sensitivity labels, you may see them come across your Word documents, your PowerPoints, saying that this document is confidential, highly confidential, public, whatever. And those can all have features associated with them, and you can leverage those to help protect content with regard to sharing and use by M365 Copilot. Creating or updating an employee privacy and acceptable use policy is going to be critical for AI. So not just M365 Copilot, but really, as we'll see, we'll get into the auditing capabilities of it, and it's important for people to know what their expected level of privacy is for the work that they're doing in the office for their employer. There may be no expectation of privacy, or there may be some, but things like usernames, prompts, and responses can all be audited and collected. So employees, should be, informed as to what the potential is there. And then acceptable use is really laying out around how to use generative AI technologies, whether or not external services are acceptable under certain circumstances or not, and what the implications of those are should there be like a violation, so to speak, of acceptable use. And then to address the end users plan for training and the education. This, I can't emphasize this enough, not just simply because I'm an MCT, but it's just realistic for adoption and making sure that the organization gets the most out of their investment in M365 Copilot. Not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm going to move on. And let's talk about what we got next. Get the plane out of the hangar and talk about SharePoint Advanced Management. So SharePoint Advanced Management was released about a year or so ago, aggregating a bunch of different technologies. It had been previously licensed separately, but in the last couple of months, Microsoft actually folded the capabilities into M365 Copilot license as well. So this provides a wealth of tools that you can use to help plan for and maintain your M365 Copilot deployment. So first off, addressing the number one cause that we are dealing with in adoption, we have a number of different capabilities, to address oversharing. The first one that we have here is a baseline report that does your entire tenant. It's a significant report. You can only access it from PowerShell, and you can run it against SharePoint, and you can run it against OneDrive. And this basically crawls your entire tenant and looks for potential oversharing issues that you may have with regard to everyone except external users, guest permissions for sharing links, items with unique permissions, etc. So there's a lot of really good information that you can use to kind of inform your deployment efforts at this point, but it is massive and can actually take up to 5 days to generate these reports. You can only run them about once every 30 days, so just kind of be aware of that one. Next up, we have the actual everyone except external users dedicated report. This is one, if you're not familiar, everyone except external users is a built-in group in your organization. So it's possible to assign access to a SharePoint site or a document that is everyone except external users. So that kind of rules out the external folks, which is great. But if you have a site or a document that's really not intended for everyone except external users, then that could be a potential problem to address. So really valuable to see, who is using this one and what can be done, what to target about this. Sensitivity labels, again, going back to data classification, if you're already using sensitivity labels, this is a great report that helps identify, up to like 10,000 sites. When you download the report, it includes site sensitivity, site unmanaged device policy, and site external sharing policy. So again, good information right there out of the box with these. The bottom three are really focused on sharing links. So anyone is that really broad-based one that I talked about in terms of the external sharing permissions. This is really a dangerous one in many respects because these links allow people to access content without necessarily signing in. So it's really important to get a handle on these links. People in your organization may seem safe, but again, people may be sharing, tagging a document, let's say, that's extremely sensitive for people in your organization and maybe only sending it to a few people, but then those links can also be forwarded. And as long as that person is in the organization, they too will then have access to it. So really important to get a handle on those links. And then the last one there is, even though it's labeled specific people, it's really focused on shared externally. So that can really help kind of lock down information that may have been, obviously shared to somebody outside the organization. So all three of these reports, can be very useful, particularly when taken together, getting started. And all of this can also be used to help inform additional governance and policies with regard to how information is used within your organization and what kind of security around sites are needed. Then with all that great information, what can you do with it? So each of the access reports allow administrators to kick off what's called a site access review. So this is a very simple process that basically sends an email to a site owner and says, these are the issues we found. Please remediate. Let me know when you're done. So not a high stress process per se, but it is something that you can get started with. You may have to follow up with. There is a dashboard for admins to manage the different site access reviews that are going on. I should also mention that each of the reports by default will only show the top 100 sites. So if you have more than 100 sites, you're going to want to take that into consideration and perhaps look at configuring additional reports to target different aspects, for each one of those links. All right, so the next one is site ownership policies. So many organizations, if you're trying to do a site access review and you try to send something to the site owner, you find out that there is no site owner. So this is where site ownership policies can really help. So you can configure one or more policies targeting site ownership and requiring one or two site owners. Two is the max, unfortunately. I'm not sure why they still limit it to two, but I would say that two should be the standard when you're setting up these policies. So after running some of these reports, and if you're finding that site ownership is a problem within your organization, you can configure these policies and then you can release them and they will start notifying depending upon how you have it configured, they can notify site collection administrators, they can notify other members of the site, etc. They can notify the manager of the owner, things like that. So you can start enforcing ownership of the different SharePoint sites. So this can be, very useful because it also plays into the next one, which is inactive site policies. So these policies look at a variety of different signals within M365 to determine if a particular site is active. This has a direct impact on M365 Copilot because the information that's on these sites might be stale, might be inaccurate, whatever, but yet if it's available to Copilot, Copilot could use that information to generate its responses. And I think we all have had experiences, if you've been using AI, where the responses don't always map to reality. So we always have to do some checking. So this inactive site policy can go through the sites in your organization and notify site owners. So again, we need to have site owners and give them an opportunity to respond. And it may be the type of thing where it's like, oh yeah, we still need this, for whatever reason, or it could be like crickets and you don't hear back, and then you can take an action such as setting the site to read only. If there's no response within a certain period, that can usually make people scream if they are using the site. And then the second thing, which I'll talk about at the end a little bit more, is you can also archive the site. There is no delete option, at least not right now, but just being able to archive the site is an advantage to taking it out of circulation. As a side note, the other advantage is if you're paying extra for storage, taking out inactive sites might help reduce the levels of the storage in your organization and maybe reduce some costs. The next up, now that you've identified these sites and figured out which ones are problematic or not, you may want to consider additional security strategies around the sites, or at least have them ready to go when you anticipate some problems. So there are a number of restricted access policies that you can deploy, courtesy of SAM, that is, I should clarify, is kind of like a hammer, in my opinion, rather than a scalpel. So nonetheless, they could be very useful, strategically as well as kind of an emergency situation. The first one, which is the first two are similar, restrict access to SharePoint by group and restrict access to OneDrive by group. So what this does is basically allows you to specify security groups that have access to particular SharePoint sites. So you may, for example, in a broad brush type of thing, say that only, let's say, full-time users have access to SharePoint sites. So you create a group for full-time users, and perhaps part-time users are not part of that group. So if you're not in that security group, you will not have access to the SharePoint site. That doesn't mean that even if you are in the group that you do have access to the content within a particular site. It's just kind of opening the door, but you still have to be assigned permissions to the site itself before you can gain access to the content. So the challenge when you're laying these things out is just to be aware that if you already have permissions to a particular SharePoint site, but you're not included in this security group for accessing SharePoint, you will not have access to that group anymore. You will be blocked, and you'll receive an error message saying that you're blocked by policy. Similar to SharePoint, we have the OneDrive one, same basic principle. This, you can create one or more groups for people who have access to OneDrive. Anyone who's licensed for OneDrive should be in there. And again, even if you're licensed for OneDrive and you're not in this allowed group, then you're not going to have access to your OneDrive anymore. So just be aware of that. These are, truly broad stroke type of security access. The third one that we have up there is restrict access to the specific OneDrive. So, a little bit more granular than the previous one is you can set up security groups that have access to a specific OneDrive. So an example might be you may have a policy at your organization where, only people in the finance department can, share documents from OneDrive. So you may have a finance group, and that finance group is added, to everybody who's in the finance. So each individual OneDrive for the finance department would then have the finance group added to the restricted access policy. And therefore, anyone within finance would not be able to share documents with anyone outside of finance. So that might be a little bit more tricky, to implement, but it is a tool there that can be useful. The last one there is kind of going to potentially the heart of it, and that might be, in some respects, creation. Who can create the sites in the first place? So restricting OneDrive and SharePoint site creation is, again, kind of a hammer. It too, goes based on security groups. This is different than the other ones, though, in the sense that you can only create either an allow list or a deny list for the tenant. So that's kind of a unique thing about these is so once you create it once, that applies to the entire tenant. So again, planning and consideration is there. The other takeaway from this is be aware that this includes pretty much all types of site creation. So if you use self-service site creation, if you allow teams if you allow users to create teams inherently creates a SharePoint site. If people are not in the proper groups to be able to create this, then they won't be able to, they just won't be able to. So these things, though, give site admins, kind of that tenant level control over things that previously SharePoint, at least in my, consideration, is they haven't really had. A lot of the restricted access stuff tends to either take place at the site collection level, the site level, or arguably via PowerShells, or of course third party. All right. Axel, let me come back to that, and I'll talk about that one at the end with regard to some of the websites. Okay. And then just to kind of wrap up with a couple of other tools, I really view these as kind of like temporary, so I wouldn't rely on them too much, but we have restricted SharePoint search. This is actually not a SAM tool. This is inherent to M365 Copilot. And this really allows you to specify up to 100 sites that are acceptable for Copilot to access. The catch here is kind of twofold with this one is, one, of course, you're potentially limited to 100, which may get you started, but if your organization is larger than that, you're definitely going to want to use this as a kind of a stop off. The other thing to keep in mind is that lots of times M365 Copilot and Enterprise Search are, intertwined. So if you notice, this is restricted SharePoint Search, not restricted Copilot. So if you start specifying the top 100 sites thinking you're only dealing with M365 Copilot, you will notice an impact to your Enterprise Search as well. Similarly, we have restricted SharePoint content discovery. This is much more of a deny. So this will not remove things from the index per se just as much, but will block the site content from generally being consumed by Copilot and ultimately enterprise search as well. But this is not a shield per se. If users still have direct access to content, they'll still be able to access that content. And it doesn't necessarily go down to cover things like site search and things. So definitely read through and understand where the pros and cons are for each one of these as you go through. So use the reports. You can get started pretty quickly using the reports. As long as you have one Copilot license, you should be able to start using the reports. Evaluate blocking the anyone links. As I mentioned, users with these links don't necessarily have to sign in to access the content. Go with 2 site owners versus 1. There's a lot of reasons I can get into why this is valuable. If you're running into this issue, I'm sure you understand too, but definitely take advantage of that one. Mainly to get the site owners involved. We have the site review, site access reviews that we can leverage. The site owners know their content the best. They should be able to take care of any of the oversharing issues and concerns that administrators and higher ups have without overwhelming the administrators. Take advantage of automating the site cleanup, archive what you can. Use the restricted access policies to kind of layer in security. As I talked about, they are kind of hammers, so that might be good in a couple of cases, but definitely think through what your security layer, what your security plan is going to be if you're going to deploy those. And then, as I touched on with restrict SharePoint search and SharePoint discovery, the first one is an allow. The second one is more of a deny. They are not absolute, and they do have pros and cons to them, and they should probably only be used as temporary measures. All right, so in following that up, we get into more tooling that M365 brings to the table as a whole, not specifically for Copilot, but definitely has use within it. Purview is potentially a high-end set of suite of services for M365, or you can add it to some of the other subscriptions that you may have. It's basically E5 to get the most out of Purview, or adding an E5 compliance license to, say, an E3 or something like that to get the most out of it. Devil's in the details with some of these services, but just be aware of that as we go through here. So this is not by any stretch everything that is in Purview suites. I'm just calling out some of the kind of the bigger ones, at least as I consider them. First one that we have there is DSPM for AI, the Data Security Posture Management. This is kind of a one-stop shop for monitoring everything AI related in your organization. So within that, of course, is M365 Copilot. This gives you another place to access oversharing reports and act on things, as well as apply what they call one-click policies. So you can, choose to apply DLP or insider risk management policies that DSPM has recommended, and that will go into effect right there. It also, being a kind of umbrella, rolls up information from pretty much all of the other Purview services, so that you can, for example, monitor all policies from all the different services in one place. So that includes the one-click policies, as well as any policies directly generated or created from, say, DLP or communication compliance, insider risk, whatever. So one-stop shop, really great to get started with, pretty much out of the box. It does require auditing, so Purview auditing must be enabled as part of that. So auditing is going to keep track of, among other things, everything M365 related, including prompts and responses. So it's pretty inclusive as to what is being captured from an auditing standpoint. The data loss prevention that you can take a look at, setting up those things. There's analytics for DLP that feeds into DSPM, as well as being able to set up specific DLP policies. One of the key things, it's in preview right now, is you can actually restrict Copilot summarization, based on, say, for example, your sensitivity label. The other one that is probably going to be more expansive for advanced planning is you can also leverage endpoint DLP for controlling, what sites and activities happen on the actual user's devices. So that can be pretty helpful as well. And then on the practical side, you can actually create DLP policies that block pasting sensitive content or files into Copilot chats. So that can all be pretty much controlled or managed through DLP policies. Insider risk actually focuses more on the end user. Again, one of those things where it may be good to update your policy depending upon how you apply this. This is, again, has analytics that feed into the DSPM. DSPM, one of the other tools up there is the Activity Explorer, where it allows you to drill into what's going on in your environment across AI as well. But insider risk management has a default template for risky AI usage. So that is, I believe it's still in preview, but something like that is pretty sure to move forward. And that can help manage, how people are using the AI tools with M365 in particular. It also contributes or has some privacy controls on it as to whether or not it can pseudo-anonymize usernames, and also can be used to calculate a risk rating that is shown again in DSPM for user behavior. So that can really kind of dig into either people who need additional help and education as to how to properly use their tools, or in the event that somebody is a little bit more, on the bad actor side of things, it'll help you capture some of that. Information protection has a lot going on in it, but I'm just going to, hammer on the sensitivity labels again. This is kind of a big thing. The sensitivity labels, they can be used in a lot of different places, as I've alluded to. You can also kind of use them for containers, which in this particular case is like referring to SharePoint sites. And you can also specify default labels at document libraries. So if you're kind of overwhelmed with the idea of labeling every piece of information in your organization, you may be able to leverage some of these more blanket approaches to get things going. These are all respected by Copilot. So it definitely is probably one of the more critical tasks if you don't already have something like that up and running. Communication compliance, this adds another level of monitoring on top of prompts and responses, which may be a compliance requirement to validate, for whatever that, everything is kind of above board, but also for inappropriate behavior. So the classic concerns of, prompt hijacking or jailbreaking an AI, the violence, sex, and abuse that is out potentially, some people may try to abuse as part of their leveraging of M365 Copilot. This is a way to get a handle on some of these things. Again, the username is anonymized by default, so you may want to make sure again, this is in your privacy policy, but definitely I think this is one of the important ones to take a look at for securing your workplace. And then the last one, data lifecycle and records management. Again, a lot goes on in that one, but you can create retention policies for prompts and responses. So definitely not covering everything that can go on with this, but plan for the licensing as you dig into some of the Purview services, and as Microsoft seems to be doing a lot more of lately, be aware of pay-as-you-go. For Purview. M365 Copilot is largely included in most activities. I can't think of an exception right now where it's not, but if you start expanding your web of AI tools, be aware that Purview may also spin into pay-as-you-go services. Deploy the DSPM for AI, even if you're not ready for everything else. As I mentioned, this is a great place to aggregate information, and you can start getting a view across the organization, even if you're just looking at M365 Copilot. Can't hammer on sensitivity labels enough. Leverage the container labels and the default document library labels. If you're going to use encryption with the labels, then you're also going to want to enable co-authoring for files that are encrypted. Make it easier for people to continue collaboration. For DLP, if you're going to get into the endpoint DLP, you're going to have to register devices and also deploy browser add-ons. So registered devices may already be done in your organization. You do want to make sure that they are registered with Purview. Usually there is sync across the other tools that do that. And then the browser add-ons. Browser add-ons are basically supported for Edge, Chrome, and Firefox right now. So I don't believe there's one for Safari, but if your company does not standardize on browsers, that may be something else you have to consider. Use the risky AI policy template, get that configured for your organization. That's, I think, an important thing to include. And then plan for the communication compliance for regulatory compliance, primarily if you're a regulated company, finance, healthcare, government. You may have considerations there in that one. And then if your company does have records management, then or other for compliance regulations, you want to have that retention policy set up. Wow, we are rolling up on time. Okay. Copilot Chat. So Microsoft rebranded Bing for Copilot for Bing, and incorporate it as M365 Copilot Chat. I think this was a good move overall, at least from Microsoft's perspective. What this really does is a couple of things. Is from a practical standpoint, at least, Microsoft bundles this in with M365 subscriptions all over the place. So odds are pretty high that your organization has access to it already. So there's a no cost associated with it. It also layers in enterprise data protection that I talked about earlier, just to, basically assure that, there's protections involved, that your prompts and responses aren't necessarily being used to retrain anything. So it's kind of good on the upside of that. It works within your organization's security context and boundaries, unlike, those cutting edge users who want to go out and grab ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever out there. You can leverage Copilot Chat, and know that it's going to respect the security boundaries of your organization. And then you also have the added advantages of monitoring for compliance within your organization. So from an organizational standpoint, it may make a lot of sense to incorporate this. So naturally, consider it as part of your deployment strategy. The key differentiator between Copilot Chat and M365 Copilot, the licensed version, is that it does not have inherent access to your corporate data. So there's no interaction with the Graph API. It does not look at SharePoint data directly, anything like that. Now, users can still upload and paste business content into it, but that's, a lot less of a risk, arguably, than perhaps, the full-blown M365 Copilot is. The other thing is it gives you kind of some latitude as an organization to give people AI capabilities without necessarily paying for the full M365 Copilot license, which again, it comes down to those use cases as to what's valuable and, who benefits the most from it versus just turning it on for everyone. And then, I have here messaging it as the alternative to the free and public GAI services. As I mentioned, it's more or less on par with a lot of the public services. So it can be a really valuable governance tool to be able to say, hey, we've got this inside, use this, don't use the outside services for business content. And that again goes to acceptable use. All right, not a deep dive on these and certainly not exhaustive, but there are some other services that you can take advantage of that you may already have access to. Entra, which used to be Azure Active Directory, not really Copilot related, but MFA, strongly recommend deploying MFA in general. But more specifically, you can leverage conditional access policies to help govern access to content and Copilot. You can also leverage Entra access reviews. This is different from the access reviews that SharePoint Advanced Management brings to the table. But you can use those generally to target things like guest access, group access across the organization and help kind of, secure your organization more broadly than what you would get from the site access reviews. M365 Archive, this plugs into the inactive site policies. So when I talked about being able to archive sites, you would have to use M365 Archive. This is convenient from the one standpoint that it takes content out of circulation for Copilot. So if you archive a site, Copilot doesn't have access to it. You're not deleting it, so you can actually, bring it back. There are some nuances, from an M365 Archive standpoint as to, some of the rules around how and when you can do that, but it's usually pretty fast. However, this is a pay-as-you-go service. Again, some stipulations in there with regard to whether or not you're at your storage capacity. But for the most part, be aware that it could be that pay-as-you-go charge for it, which is ultimately going to be cheaper than paying extra for SharePoint storage. Defender for Office 365, this is safe links, basically for any of the chats for M365 Copilot. This was rolled out about a month or so ago. And can be very useful for protecting links that may come back from either, primarily external sources. So it's good to have that kind of defense there. Defender for Cloud Apps, you may see this more on some of the external and external AI usage, and ties in with endpoint strategies, including endpoint DLP, and of course, Defender for Endpoint. So they can all work together to help protect end users, and their devices from when they're accessing external AI services. So good stuff in there. Can't really get into like a whole lot from a technical standpoint around some of the recommendations here. So from a high level, it's really look at the Microsoft services that potentially have value add for your M365 strategies. Most of them are coming out with Copilot specific guidance. So you can, see some of that in some of these other services, particularly with Purview. I believe Defender for Cloud Apps has one, as well as Defender for Endpoint. I believe they both have that as well. Leverage the access reviews. Look at M365 Archive. I think that it does provide value, but make sure you understand its pricing mechanism if you go ahead and deploy that. And then plan ahead for shadow AI and external AI in general. Whether or not you are trying to prevent usage of the free GPT services, or whether you are also leveraging something like ChatGPT Enterprise. These other services add value to helping you manage and protect your organization and its intellectual property. All right. This is not by any stretch a guarantee or anything along those lines, but it's just a high level kind of a direct critical path to trying to get to usage of M365 Copilot. Get a handle on your oversharing situation first and foremost, because that's going to have probably one of the most significant impacts to how M365 Copilot works. Once you have a handle on that, secure the high-risk content. You're going to want to prioritize that. That can entail any number of the different things that I talked about today. And then deploy to a pilot group. Don't turn it on en masse. Use those use cases that you created to determine who should get first crack at it. Is it marketing? Is it finance? Is it IT? Who's going to use it? And then monitor the situation and repeat the process for the next group. In parallel, while you are working on this, you can look at deploying M365 Copilot Chat. As I mentioned, it doesn't have access to the business content directly, so it may be a safe alternative to help get people started. It also provides a valuable training ground, real world to a certain extent, to be able to get your users up to speed on how to use Copilot Chat to the best of its abilities, learning how to write prompts primarily, but also educating them on what's changed with regard to some of your governance around the AI services as well. Specifically train the pilot group, and you may or may not choose to roll out the licenses as part of that training, or do a kind of a staged, but you're going to want to focus on them, get them ready, and then deploy the pilot group. All right, and then just in conclusion here, again, I reemphasize the business cases. It may sound like a lot of work, but it really can help justify rolling out Copilot, M365 Copilot in your organization, or not. Not everybody has to have it. So you can determine those groups that don't, and what priority they may get their licensing. Don't skimp on the training and education. Users need this. There's no doubt about it. So definitely focus on this to make sure that the organization is going to get the most productivity gains out of this by having a well-informed, well-educated employee base. The used Copilot Chat, as I mentioned, incorporated as your training tool. It does provide a level of safety in terms of organizational content. Check the other services, figure out if there's a gap, what might plug it. Layer in your defenses. Plan for right now, your internal concerns are probably the main thing in terms of locking down SharePoint, arguably OneDrive, understanding Exchange. But eventually you're probably also going to take a look at how you lock down the external protections as well. So if you want to block things like Anthropic, Perplexity, Gemini, ChatGPT. There are ways to do it through a combination of the tools that I talked about tonight. This is not a one and done type of thing. So, plan to continue, basically your vigilance, and adjust, inspect what you have, learn from it, make the adjustments where you need to, and then watch out for the pay-as-you-go services. All right. Thank you all very much. Went a little longer. I've got a couple of minutes if you have questions for the chat. Thank you all very much for your time. I know it's valuable, and I do appreciate it. And then summarizes Microsoft's obligations and/or warranties. Yeah, so let me do this. Hang on just a second. This is not everything. So those are 3 links that I put in there. The first one is to the Microsoft Generative AI Services section of the licensing terms, general licensing terms. This specifies basically how Microsoft will use your data, will not use your data, that you own the output, and then the customer copyright commitment with the conditions that customers have to meet in order for Microsoft to defend you in a lawsuit, so to speak. The second one there is the Copilot Enterprise Data Protection. That one kind of reiterates a lot of the stuff and mentions that your prompts and responses are yours, you're private. And then the third one there is just simply a link to the product page for Copilot's data security and privacy within it. So that's a good one to get started with in kind of getting a general overview of what's going on with M365 Copilot. There's a second one right under that one when you go check out the documentation with regard to web queries that I would recommend you also check out. I don't have the link handy, but you'll see it in the table of contents from that third link. Microsoft M365 Copilot uses Bing Search to augment its results and kind of qualify and improve responses, offset hallucinations, etc. So you might want to take a look at how that is used and how it may differ from other protections, from Copilot and stuff. So definitely check those out. And then Copilot Chat, I believe, also has a dedicated page, but you'll be able to see the pattern just from reading the M365 Copilot privacy notice. All right. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out of the day. And I'll hang on for a minute if Domi is okay with that and see if we have any other questions.
Thanks, David. Yes, we can actually hang out for a few more minutes if there are any other questions. I actually also added my email in the chat. If you guys have any questions for David, we can pass them along, or any questions about Extreme Labs, my email is there. So please feel free to reach out at any time.
I've posted my contact information, basically via LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to me, you can do that as well. Again, if you do connect, please include a little note in the invite